Welcome back here to Surrey Hill Cycle Works, and today we're of course looking at the Cervelo S5. The purpose of this video today is I want to take you in for a closer look and look at the finer details of this bike and have a look at all the tube shapes. Before we get into it, I think I have to say I give this bike, or I call it, the Audi R8 effect. So the Audi R8 effect is in photos, it doesn't look amazing, but when you actually get it in person, it's a really cool looking bike. So with that being said, come on in, let's start at the top. Of course, I think the most prominent feature of this bike has got to be the V-shaped stem here. So basically the idea is that Cervelo wanted to keep airflow attached to the top tube, so air runs straight through here and should be able to stay attached to the top tube easier and then split at the back. I would argue that this V-shaped fork is actually much more attractive than the one that Bianchi has released. I think it looks much better on the Cervelo here. All of these extra small parts here are for maintenance on the bike, so if you want to access the stem, then you've got to go in there, or the headset bearings. Then this is actually a two-piece, it turns out, so the bolt sits underneath here, and the bars then bolt onto the V-stem itself. I think it just allows for a little bit more adjustability, so you can buy different widths and different length stems. If you want to see that two-piece apart, so these three bolts are obviously where you bolt it to the stem, and then you've actually got adjustability as you place it on here. So the bars can actually slide this way or this way a little bit, so you can get some rotation in the bars as well, increasing its adjustability. If you want to adjust this, the height of this, there are spaces that you can put in, and they look exactly like this. So they more basically just slot in place. So if you want to, you undo these three bolts, raise this up, and slide this into place. That's all you need to do for this new bike. A lot easier than the old one. With the handlebars out of the way, we can get onto the main frame itself now. This is the newer one. I'm going to compare all the old stuff to the new stuff in a bit, but let's talk about the frame. So this bike is mainly designed to maintain airflow attached from the wheels to the frame itself. So you can kind of see that this is very closely cut out. Normally only time trial bikes have that much of a cutout and a wheel this close for this long attached to the frame there. Then if you want to look head on, you've got a decent amount of space between the fork and the wheel itself, just to maintain airflow attached to the fork and keep the airflow attached to the wheel as well. Then we've got the same story in the back. I mean, most traditional bikes keep this coming downwards here, whereas Cervelo have got the wheel cut in really deep into the frame. If we look at the rear wheel here, it's much of the same story. You can see how much of it is basically hugging the rear wheel on the frame here. And it's actually concave in the back here. This lets the rear wheel be closer and keep more airflow attached from the frame shape into the wheel itself. One thing this does sacrifice though is a little bit of adjustability here with your seat post, but I'm sure if you buy the right bike size, this should be enough adjustability for you anyway. If we look top down here, these tubes are actually a little bit wider and a little bit chunkier than you would think or seem. I'd assume a lot of that's to help direct airflow around the bottles, and also it's to keep airflow attached from the wheel to the top here. If we start to look more towards the rear end of the bike, you can actually see on the back edges, they're much narrower, so they've got those kind of like knacker shaped tubes all over this bike, and that goes with the head tube, that goes with the fork, that goes with the rear triangle here, and of course the seat post. Then classic Cervelo, on their S5s, they tend to have a dual split paint job, and they've done the same on here. So we've got a gloss matte, and then it goes into a matte black for the rest of it here. The matte black isn't quite fully a matte black, it's actually see-through on the carbon. And you should be able to see it right there. You can actually see the carbon weave underneath the matte surface, and that goes for the whole bike here. When it comes to turn on the handlebars, they stop right here, which is about normal for something with this much integration. You don't really need to turn that much more anyway in the real world. One thing I did notice is that the seat post clamp here does stick out just a little bit. Not sure if that's normal, but I'd like that to be a bit flusher. As I said earlier, I've of course got both bikes here, their old generation and their new generation. So let's start and get into the differences. The first thing I should say is the weight reduction on the newer frame is actually massive. So for the frame and fork, there is a 300 gram reduction compared to the old frame. And that is massive considering you've got the same, if not better, newer aerodynamics. The fork is also now a one piece, and then the spacers go above it here, whereas on the old one here, you can see it's actually a two piece, so it's a less strong, less rigid design as a whole. Then if we compare the bikes head on, the front tube here isn't as narrow, or the front fork, and you can see it's definitely a lot wider here, and it's also not as deep. And that's because as the UCI have relaxed their rules, they've allowed you to go narrower on the front there, and of course deeper on the head tube here, so you've got much more airflow attachment to play with. I did say I'd weigh the bikes in, so I've got my suitcase scales here, and let's start with the older bike. That's meant to be about 300 grams heavier. This bike comes in at 8.65 kilos. Then for this bike here, we have slap bang 8 kilos. Both of these bikes are in frame size 54, and yes, there is a mild difference in some of the components, such as this is Dura-Ace and this is an Ultegra group set as well. When it comes to work and maintenance on these bikes, I do have it on good authority from the mechanics here that these bikes are a pain in the butt to work on. Even though the new one has worked on simplifying some things, such as the adjustability, it's still not easy if you just want to do something as simple such as change a headset bearing. So it is a very integrated bike and will take a lot more time to work on it. Well everyone, there is a closer look at the tube shapes of the Cervelo S5, including the old to the new. Here at Surrey Hills Cycle Works, if you want to buy any of these bikes, then they come fully equipped with everything you'll ever need to make any adjustment you need for these bikes. Their goal is to make sure that you go away riding the bike perfect for your fit. If there's anything I've missed or you have any questions, put them down below, or you can always ask me here on Instagram. This has been Cycling Unboxed. I'll see you in the next video.